My name is Ryan. I'm 36 years old, and if you'd asked anyone just a few months ago, they'd have described my marriage to Amy as calm, reliable, maybe even a little boring. We lived in a modest but warm townhouse in a quiet part of Portland, a neighborhood lined with old maples and hydrangea bushes that Amy always tried to keep alive in our postage stamp front yard. We met in college, married at 28, and until recently, I thought we were one of those couples who would quietly, contentedly grow old together. It's strange how a single moment can shatter years of certainty. That Thursday evening, rain pattered against the car windshield as I parked outside Ember and Oak, a restaurant Amy had picked for her work dinner. She'd mentioned it at breakfast. Late one tonight, babe. Big project. Might even be drinks after, but I'll text you. I hadn't planned to stop by. I told myself it was just a sudden urge to see her, but the truth is, something had felt off for weeks, maybe months. Amy had been distracted lately. Quick to laugh at her phone, distant at dinner, suddenly secretive with her calendar. But I brushed off the doubts, chalking it up to stress at her new job. As I walked inside, the dining room was a hum of laughter, glassware, and clinking silverware. I scanned the tables, looking for Amy's familiar figure. She was always easy to spot in a crowd. Tall, dark hair, usually dressed just a little too nicely for the occasion. Tonight was no different. She wore a navy dress I didn't recognize, her hair curled and glossy. What caught my eye first wasn't Amy, but the way she was leaning in close to a man I'd never met, her hand resting lightly on his. They sat at the edge of a large group, separated from the rest as if in their own private world. The man, tall, blonde, sharp-suited, was laughing at something Amy had just whispered. His thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand, and her shoulders shook with laughter. I froze for a second, invisible in the shadows by the bar. I watched Amy take a sip of her wine, then look at the man beside her with a look I hadn't seen in years. Not since we were dating, not since the early days. I stepped forward. The movement caught Amy's eye. Her laughter stopped, and for a split second her eyes widened in surprise. Then she let go of the man's hand, almost too quickly, and plastered on her usual easy smile, the one she used at parties and with strangers. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" she called, loud enough for the people nearby to look up. I smiled, playing along. "Just thought I'd stop by and say hi. You said you'd be here with your team." She nodded, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "Yeah, of course. This is Zach, my boss." Zach stood and offered a handshake, his expression smooth and practiced. "Good to meet you, Ryan. Amy's told us a lot about you." I shook his hand, feeling my stomach twist. Amy slipped her arm through mine, as if to reassure me. "We were just going over some last-minute details about the project," Amy said. "It's been a rough week for everyone. Zach's been a huge support." I glanced at their empty plates and the open bottle of wine between them. The int asterisk made way, their chairs angled toward each other. The rest of her team was crowded at the other end of the table, deep in conversation, oblivious to whatever was happening in this quiet corner. Amy noticed my glance and squeezed my hand. "Ryan, it's not what it looks like. Zach was just helping me work through some ideas for the campaign. He's been so patient with me. Don't read into it." Her tone was light, but her eyes flickered with something like irritation, or maybe fear. Zach, for his part, smiled too kindly. "She's your wife, Ryan. You have every right to be protective. But I assure you, we were just talking shop." I tried to believe them. I really did. But as Amy gently guided me back toward the bar, away from the group, she leaned in and whispered, "You can't just show up like this. It makes me look unprofessional." That stung. I stared at her, noticing how she kept glancing over my shoulder, as if hoping Zach would come rescue her. "I just wanted to see you," I said quietly. She sighed, smoothing her dress. "Look, you have to stop being so jealous. This is important for my career, Ryan. Don't embarrass me in front of my team." For a few awkward minutes, I lingered by the bar, nursing a drink I didn't want, watching as Amy drifted back to Zach. The rest of the dinner played out in a haze. I tried to listen to the conversations around me, But my mind kept replaying the way Zach had leaned in, the way Amy had smiled back at him, her hand in his. After another 20 minutes, Amy returned to say they were heading out for drinks at another place. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, almost mechanical, and told me to go home. She'd be late. I watched as she slipped her arm through Zach's and left the restaurant, the rest of her team trailing behind. Driving home, rain streaked across my windshield, blurring the city lights. My mind spun in circles. Maybe I really was overreacting. Maybe Amy was right and I'd made a fool of myself in front of her colleagues for nothing. But deep down, I couldn't shake the image of her hand in Zach's, the way she'd pulled away when she saw me, the look in her eyes that was somewhere between guilt and annoyance. At home, I sat in the dark, listening to the ticking clock and the rain. Amy didn't text until after midnight. Just got home. Don't wait up, had to take care of a work thing. Love you. But that night, for the first time in our marriage, I didn't believe her. Something had shifted. And as I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, I realized I didn't know how to find my way back. In the days that followed that evening, the events at Ember and Oak replayed in my mind like a broken record. I couldn't shake the image of Amy and Zach together, so close, so comfortable, like they were more than just coworkers. It wasn't just that moment, though. As I thought more about it, more pieces of the puzzle started to fit into place. I had always considered Amy to be reliable, grounded. We had a rhythm, a pattern to our lives that I assumed would always stay the same. We'd been married for 8 years, and up until recently, things had been quiet. Sure, there had been the occasional disagreement, the minor bumps in the road that come with any long-term relationship. But nothing like this. Nothing that felt like it was pulling us apart in ways I couldn't even understand yet. It wasn't just that night, those little signs had been building up for months, maybe even longer. I'd noticed how often Amy was staying late at work. When I asked her about it, she'd always have some new excuse. Big deadlines, the project's a mess, the team needs me. She didn't even try to hide the exhaustion in her voice anymore when she'd come home at 10 p.m., her eyes red, her body stiff from hours of meetings. And those dinners, she was eating out more than ever. When we did eat together, the conversation seemed strained, like she wasn't fully present. I remembered the time I'd invited her to meet me for lunch at that cute cafe on the corner of Broadway. I'd been excited to catch up, just the two of us. But when I got there, Amy had texted me to say she was running late at work, something she never used to do. She told me to go ahead and eat without her. I sat there, picking at my food while pretending not to notice the way my mind kept wandering. Something in me had started to doubt her. And then there was the way she'd started dressing lately. Amy had always been stylish, but over the past few months, I noticed a shift. New dresses, new heels, lipsticks and shades I'd never seen before. When I asked her about it, she always had an answer, just treating myself, or I saw it on sale and couldn't resist. But it never seemed like enough. The clothes didn't feel like something she was wearing for me anymore, they felt like something she was wearing for someone else. I remember the first time I saw her new dress. She had worn it for a work event, she said, but the way she had glanced at herself in the mirror before we left told me something different. Her reflection held an expression that was both proud and guilty, as though she wasn't sure she was allowed to feel that good about herself. I should have noticed then, but I didn't want to admit what was happening. Then there were the texts. At first, I thought it was nothing, just Amy being busy, working on her phone while we were supposed to be watching a movie together. But as time went on, I realized she'd beg and turning the screen away from me whenever I walked into the room. And when I did ask her about it, her answers were short, dismissive, just work stuff, Ryan, or don't worry about it, I'm fine. The final straw came one night when I asked her about location sharing. I'd never been one to obsess over where she was, but something felt different now. Something was off. She turned it off, casually brushing it off when I asked. I don't need you to track me, Ryan. I'm not a child. But that moment stuck with me, a small but telling sign that Amy wasn't who I thought she was anymore. The final incident, though, was at Thanksgiving. Amy had hardly spoken to me, sitting at the dinner table, glued to her phone. It wasn't the first time, but that day felt different. I noticed her smiling at messages, grinning at something someone had sent her. Her brother caught her, too. Who's got you smiling like that? He asked, and Amy's face turned crimson before she laughed it off. But when she got up to leave the table to take a client call, her phone stayed behind on the table. Without thinking, I picked it up. I had no real reason to look, but a gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach told me to. What I saw was nothing short of a gut punch. There, on her screen, was a text from Zach. It read, I can't stop thinking about you. I wish I could just kiss you right now. My heart stopped. I couldn't breathe for a second. I put the phone back on the table, but I couldn't look at her the same way again. I couldn't pretend everything was fine. I had known, deep down, that something was happening between them, but seeing it written in black and white made it real. I didn't confront her right away. Couldn't. The words were etched into my mind, and I wasn't sure how to process them. That night, I stayed up long after Amy had gone to bed, staring at the ceiling. The doubts were no longer just doubts, they were facts. Amy had been changing, and Zach, her boss, the one who was just supporting her, had become far too familiar. But even as I lay there, my mind racing, I couldn't help but wonder. Had I missed the signs before, or had I been choosing not to see them? Had I been so wrapped up in the comfort of our life that I failed to see how much Amy was slipping away? In the days that followed, I found myself watching Amy more closely. Couldn't stop. The way she smiled at her phone. The way she'd suddenly disappear into another room with her client calls. It was all starting to add up. But the hardest part wasn't realizing that I'd been betrayed. It was knowing that Amy was slipping away from me, and I hadn't done anything to stop it. I don't know why I kept waiting. Maybe I thought things would settle down on their own. That the weirdness between Amy and me was just a temporary phase. Maybe I wanted to believe that this marriage, the one I had worked so hard to build, wasn't falling apart. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was like the ground was slowly cracking beneath my feet, and no matter how hard I tried to ignore it, I could feel the abyss opening up below me. The tipping point came unexpectedly, just like everything else. I had left work early that day. I was supposed to meet some friends, but a sudden rush of exhaustion overtook me. I decided to go home, rest for a bit, maybe surprise Amy with dinner. I didn't think I'd find anything strange when I opened the door. I wasn't looking for anything. I just wanted a quiet evening at home. As soon as I entered, I heard it. The laughter. It echoed from upstairs, mixed with the faint sounds of music playing. It didn't make sense. Amy wasn't supposed to be home. She had mentioned a late client call that afternoon, so I expected her to be busy for a few more hours. But there she was, her laughter rising above the music, warm and carefree. I walked through the quiet house toward the stairs, the laughter growing louder with every step. My heart began to beat faster, my instincts on high alert. I reached the top of the stairs, the sound of their voices now clear, and I froze. There they were, Amy and Zach, half-dressed, tangled in the sheets of our bed. The scene unfolded before my eyes like something out of a nightmare. My wife, the woman I thought I knew so well, lying there with Zach, her boss, her hand resting possessively on his chest as they tried to pull themselves together. It didn't take long for them to notice me standing in the doorway, my stomach turning, my mind struggling to catch up with what my eyes were seeing. Amy's face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock, then guilt. So much guilt. Zach scrambled to pull away, but the damage was already done. The truth was laid out in front of me, stark and undeniable. For a moment, none of us spoke. The room was thick with the heavy silence of betrayal. Then Amy started to speak, her voice shaking. She rushed to explain, to justify what I had seen. She said it wasn't what it looked like, that it wasn't intentional. Zach was just comforting her, she said, just helping her cope with the stress. I could hardly process the words. Every excuse she gave felt like a slap in the face. I didn't need to hear more. Now there are no more questions, I said quietly, my voice calm. Even though my insides were torn to shreds, there was nothing left to say. The evidence was right in front of me. Amy's face contorted in confusion, then anger, then something else. Fear. Maybe? She reached for me, but I stepped back, shaking my head. I couldn't touch her. Not like that. Not after what I had just seen. I don't know what to say, she muttered, her voice thin, desperate. I looked at Zach, still frozen in the bed, his face flushed with guilt and shame. He didn't say anything either, he couldn't. He had no defense. I'm done, I whispered. Though I wasn't sure if I was talking to Amy or to myself, it didn't matter anymore. The foundation of our marriage had cracked, and everything was spilling out, irreparably broken. Amy stood up, wrapping herself in the blanket. Her eyes were wide, still searching for something. Anything. that could undo what had just happened. But there was nothing she could say that would change it. The truth was out. Zach dressed quickly, avoiding my gaze, and muttered something about not wanting to cause more problems. But it didn't matter. He was already gone, both physically and in my mind. I didn't care about the excuses anymore. "Don't worry about it, Zach. Just go," I said, my words flat and final. He left, leaving Amy and me standing there in the silence that followed. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't even breathe in the same space as her. I turned around and walked toward the door, grabbing my keys from the table without a word. Amy called out to me, her voice breaking, but I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I could feel the tears in my chest choking me, but I held them back. There was no point in crying now. She had made her choice. "I'll be back for my things," I said, and with that I walked out, leaving the house that had once felt like a home behind. I needed to escape. I didn't know where I was going or how I was going to make it through the night, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not there. Not with her. I drove aimlessly for hours, my mind numb with disbelief. I couldn't grasp it all. It felt like I was floating above myself, watching my life crumble from a distance. But I couldn't escape it. I had seen the truth with my own eyes, and no matter how much I tried to deny it, it was there, undeniable. That night, I stayed at an old friend's place in Seattle. I rented a small room in the back of his house, and for the first time in what felt like years, I allowed myself to shut down. I didn't go anywhere, didn't answer the phone, didn't look at social media. I just existed in that small room, letting the silence consume me. It was the only way I could process what had happened, to try and heal from the crushing weight of betrayal. And yet, no matter how hard I tried, the memory of that moment, Amy and Zach together, haunted me. It was the one thing I couldn't escape. The one thing I couldn't forget. The days after I left were strange, empty. I was surrounded by the comfort of my old friend's home, yet it felt like I was drowning in solitude. Seattle wasn't far from Portland, but it might as well have been a different world. I stayed in that small room, not leaving except for the occasional walk around the block. I didn't want to see anyone, didn't want to talk to anyone. The calls from Amy and her mother came in waves, each more desperate than the last. At first, Amy left voicemail after voicemail, each one more pleading than the last, her voice breaking with emotion as she tried to explain, to apologize. But I didn't want to hear it. I didn't care about her reasons, her excuses, or her apologies. She had made her choice, and she had chosen him. She had chosen Zach. The weight of that truth crushed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I kept playing the scene over and over in my mind, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. What had I missed? What had I done wrong? I thought I might be able to numb the pain with time, but every day felt heavier. Even though I was physically away from Amy, I couldn't escape her from my thoughts. I couldn't run from the image of her and Zach together, the way she had touched him, the way her eyes had lit up when he was near. It wasn't just the betrayal, it was the sense that the woman I had married, the woman I had trusted with everything, wasn't the same person anymore. Amy had changed. I didn't know when it happened or how, but I knew now it had been happening for a long time. She had pulled away from me emotionally and physically long before I had figured it out. I had been blind, hoping things would fix themselves, but now I saw it all too clearly. I took to walking every morning, clearing my head in the crisp Seattle air. I ran, but not to stay in shape. I ran to escape. The rhythm of my feet hitting the pavement was the only thing that gave me any sense of control over my life. It was the only thing that kept my mind from spiraling into madness. Sometimes I'd find myself walking the streets, aimlessly letting the cool breeze soothe the burning anger in my chest. It wasn't just anger at Amy or at Zach, it was at myself for allowing this to happen. I had let things go on for too long without confronting what was really happening. I had let the distance between us grow without doing anything about it. I had allowed her to slip through my fingers. The loneliness was unbearable at times. I felt like a ghost, walking through life without a purpose. I wasn't just missing Amy, I was missing the life I thought we had built together. The dinners we used to have, the quiet nights watching TV, the way we used to laugh at stupid jokes. It was all gone. And I was left with nothing but the cold, hard truth. Amy's calls grew more frantic as the days passed. I could hear her voice cracking with each message she left, as if she was trying to hold on to something she had already lost. At first, I listened to the voicemails, played the recordings over and over. But soon I stopped. I couldn't hear it anymore, the desperation in her voice, the empty promises, the way she begged me to come home. She said she missed me, she said she loved me. But her words felt empty. They felt hollow. How could I believe her when I had already seen the truth? Her mother, who had always been kind to me, started calling too. She left a few messages, first to ask if I was okay, then to tell me that Amy was beside herself with guilt. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I wasn't ready to face her, not yet. I started going to therapy. I didn't expect it to fix anything, but I thought it might help me process everything. It didn't take long for my therapist to see that I was drowning in guilt and confusion. She asked me what I thought I had done wrong, what I could have done to prevent the affair. But the truth was, I didn't know. I couldn't think about the past without feeling overwhelmed with regret. But she also helped me see that this wasn't just my fault. I had been betrayed, and it wasn't because I had done anything wrong, it was because Amy had chosen to betray me. I had to start untangling everything. I had to stop blaming myself for things that were out of my control. And for the first time, I started to think about what I wanted. Not what Amy wanted, not what anyone else wanted, but what I needed. One morning, as I sat on the small couch in my friend's living room, I realized I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't keep drowning in guilt and regret. I needed to move forward. I needed to take control of my life. I packed up my things and made the decision to leave Seattle. It wasn't that I was ready to go home to Portland, but I knew I couldn't stay in limbo forever. I needed a fresh start. So I moved to Reno. I found a small place, a modest apartment that was mine and mine alone. No reminders of the past. I started working as a car mechanic, something I had always been interested in but never had the chance to pursue. It wasn't glamorous work, but it felt honest. It felt like something I could be proud of. I adopted a dog, a scruffy mutt named Benny, and every morning we would run together in the park. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I began to find peace in the small, simple things again. I wasn't the man I had been when I was married, but maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe I was finally starting to find who I was without the weight of Amy's lies pulling me down. Amy was no longer a part of my life. I had closed that chapter and I was slowly starting to heal. For the first time in months, I was beginning to feel a sense of freedom that I hadn't known in years. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And that was enough for now. The silence was the hardest part. For weeks after I left, Amy's attempts to contact me grew more insistent. I had blocked her on everything: phone calls, emails, texts, even social media, but she found ways to get through. It seemed like she would never stop. The first few messages were apologetic, full of regret. I could hear the desperation in her voice, the panic. She would leave voicemail after voicemail, always starting with some version of, "I'm so sorry, Ryan," or "Please, just talk to me." At first, I felt the pull to listen, to understand why she had done it, to hear her side of the story. But every time I heard her voice, I felt the anger rise in me like bile. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe that there was something salvageable between us. But I knew better now. I had seen everything, heard everything I needed to know. She had chosen him, not me. She had chosen Zach. Her messages eventually turned into something else, something more frantic. "Ryan, I love you. Please don't do this. I'll fix everything. Just give me a chance to explain." But no matter what she said, it was too late. I had heard enough. I had seen the truth, and I couldn't pretend that things would ever go back to the way they were. Then came the accusations. The guilt was palpable in her voice now, but it wasn't the kind of guilt that was meant to help me heal. It was the kind of guilt that was designed to make me feel sorry for her. She blamed everything: work, the stress, even me, for not noticing how much she was struggling. "If you had just been there, Ryan, maybe this wouldn't have happened. You're not innocent in this either." Her mother joined the chorus, reaching out daily, telling me how distraught Amy was. "She's heartbroken," her mother said in a message one day. "She never meant for this to happen. Please, you have to give her another chance. For the sake of the life you've built together." I couldn't believe it. It wasn't for the sake of our life together that Amy had done what she did. It was for the sake of herself, of something she wanted that I couldn't give her. She had betrayed me, and now she wanted me to fix it. But I wasn't about to fix something that wasn't broken because of me. I had always been there for her, supported her in ways I didn't even know. I had given everything to our marriage. But what she wanted wasn't me anymore. It was him. Zach. And as much as I wanted to say, "I forgive you," to tell her that we could work things out, I couldn't bring myself to say the words. The betrayal was too deep. The hurt too raw. One night, I found myself sitting on my couch in my new apartment in Reno, staring at the phone in my hand. It was a message from Amy again, this time shorter, more subdued. "I'm sorry. I know it's over. I just don't know how to fix this." That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just about her and me. This was about me moving on from the person I had been in that marriage. The person who had let Amy's behavior slide, who had tried to smooth things over instead of confronting the truth. And I wasn't that person anymore. I wasn't going to beg for her love. I wasn't going to fight for a relationship that had already crumbled under the weight of her actions. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was simply done. I had let her go. and it felt like the last weight I had been carrying was finally lifted from my shoulders. "I'll be on my way," I said, and without another word, I walked out, closing the door behind me. The apartment in Reno became my sanctuary. The world felt different here, quieter, simpler. I still remembered the life I left behind, but it no longer consumed me. I started each day with a run through the park, Benny trotting beside me, his tail wagging happily. For the first time in a long time, I woke up feeling like I had a purpose again. I started working at a local garage as a mechanic, fixing cars with my hands in a way that felt real, tangible. There was no pretending here, no pretending I had it all figured out. The work was hard, but it was honest, and I liked it. I was building something with my own two hands, and for the first time it felt like I was rebuilding my own life piece by piece. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of myself in a mirror, and I wouldn't recognize the man staring back at me. I had changed. I wasn't the man I used to be, the one who had believed in forever. But in a way, that was okay. I wasn't sure who I was becoming, but I knew one thing for sure. I was moving forward. Amy was no longer a part of my life, and for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. I had a new life now, and it was mine to shape. No more lies, no more betrayal. Just me, Benny, and the open road ahead. And that was enough.